Welcome to the A to Z of Talent with your hosts, Andrea Kirby and Zishuan Lim.
I tell you what, I've always sworn that I like dancing to that tune, so I just had a bit of a go at it then. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the A to Z of Talent. I'm one of your hosts, Andrea Kirby, and my other gorgeous co-host is Zeshuan Lim. Before we begin,
Morning.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where you're listening to us from today and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. And we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have come on to take a watch and a listen. Now, today we're doing the letter B, and I think burnout has turned into the word of the year. Everyone, in fact, I've just got off a call from someone who was telling me they just feel absolutely burnt out. And I joked to them that today could potentially become a bit of a therapy session for me as well. I have never felt so tired and so easily fed up with work, and I love what I do. So it seems to be something that that many of us are dealing with. So we're joined today by Dr. John Chan, who has put together the State of Workplace Burnout Report, and it's absolutely fascinating reading. So make sure you click on the link, and it is looking at the relationship and the trends with burnout and the relationship to workplace as well. So it can be prevented. We can do something as organisations to make this work for our people. So, John, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here today. So my name's John. I'm an organizational psychologist. I head up Infinite Potential, and we're a think tank that's dedicated to developing high quality research, insights, and practical solutions to address some of the most pressing problems that we're seeing within the workplace. Our purpose, as a think tank, is to help organizations create an environment that people actually want to be in, a place where people actually want to go, and one that will help bring out really the full potential of their people. I've been lucky enough to have had a broad experience working both as an external consultant and also in internal roles across the US, Australia, and throughout Asia as well. Pretty mostly focused in talent management, leadership identification development, and HR technology.
Yeah. And we're a highly professional organisation. I'm the proud owner of an 8-week-old puppy who just started crying at my feet. So I just had to pick him up and hold him. So, John, we did love reading this, and I haven't got through all of it, but it's definitely a topic that's gained a lot of attention. And I think there's a real focus on it. We've all survived the COVID lockdowns, and then we pivoted in work. And certainly in my community of talent acquisition, everyone lost their jobs. And then they immediately got jobs and went into these massive hiring booms. We're now finding that with an impending or a possible recession, people are starting to be worried about losing their jobs. So there's a lot going on for everyone. So what is this Global Burnout Report, and why does it exist, and what are some of the key findings?
Yeah, so those are really great points. I think we'll get to it in a second. But for the last a little bit of history on the report. For the last 3 years, we've been conducting this global longitudinal research on burnout. We've had over 8,000 participants from over 35 countries participate in this. And so the origin story, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I thought it was a really interesting point in time, as the majority of the world was going through a really similar life event. That doesn't happen, that happens probably once a generation. And this event created so much change and accelerated a lot of stuff in the way that we work. Everything from that remote work to, remote work for a lot of organizations, and also for a lot of roles that we've always said, there's no way you can do that remotely. You have to be in the office, or you have to be somewhere to do those things. We saw all of that change. And I saw that as a really great opportunity to do some research. I thought it was able to kind of see how the shared experience affected everyone at work. So in particular, I was really interested to see how the shift and whenever there's big changes both in your work life and the more sort of macro life, how did that impact the levels of burnout? Because all this change pretty much equates to stress, and when that sort of builds up over time, that leads to burnout. And I'm just really interested in seeing that. And another focus for me was during this time was actually to create a mirror of burnout that didn't focus on the individual. Now, I really wanted to shift that conversation away from the individual being the focus of a burnout. Both the reason why a person is burning out is, there's a lot of conversation. Oh, it's sort of maybe that person is doing something wrong, or they're not doing something, or maybe they're just not up for the job, or something like that. It's very individually focused, and so a lot of the solutions are individually tailored. Why don't we put this person through more training on something, or something like that? All of these individually focused. I really want to shift that conversation away from that to organizational structures and sort of the cultures that's created that's actually causing the stress within the burnout. And so, with all of that, the report and also the potential burnout inventory was created. This inventory follows the definition from the WHO on what burnout is, which is a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And so what that means is burnout is caused by structures and cultures that's creating chronic stress. And it's by no fault of the, and another message I really kind of want to get out there is it's not the fault of the individual that they are burning out. It is nothing that you're not doing or you're doing too much of. It is the situation that you're in. Yeah, and I guess.
Yeah, I think that's. Sorry, yes, keep going, John. I was going to say, I mean, that shift from that individual focus to it's more a systemic, organizational approach that needs to take place is something that we really haven't seen that much of, right? Before before your reports and bringing the work that you're doing, bring this to the conversation, really.
Yeah, that's right. We see a lot of, what we've been seeing a lot of organizations do is sort of these kind of band-aid solutions out there. You've probably seen a lot of apps that's been coming out, mindfulness on meditation, a lot of fresh fruit. And don't get me wrong, I love the fresh fruit. I partake of that every day. And also, I use those meditation apps as well. But in terms of trying to address burnout with that is not the solution for that. But you can see from an organizational point of view, it's super easy to kind of sign off on, for leaders to sign off on that. It's a one-time thing. They sign off. Or even just having the one at some a time, that's easier to sign off. But if we want to look at some of the root causes, for example, unmanageable workload, that's hard. That is a big chunk of work that the organization needs to do, and yeah, it's a much harder call for them to do.
We often find that the managers don't actually understand what work is being done as well. You start to recruit for a role and they actually don't even know what some of the work is that needs to be done. They don't understand fundamentally the things that are going to cause stress or be difficult to do, because everyone just gets on and does it to an extent.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and I think there are some jobs which maybe fall prey to this constant barrage, right? It's almost like a state of shell shock, because I remember being on the desk in-house as a recruiter. No matter how many jobs you fill, there's always more to fill, right? And even if it goes through a quiet period, you're just left with the hard jobs to fill. And I imagine things like nursing, medical. We had the chat last week with Zara from UPage. and it was all about nursing recruitment, teachers. There are so many jobs out there. I think almost all jobs these days where you can't really just say, okay, I'm done. I've finished my job for the day. I can go home. There's no matter how much work you do, there's always more that can get added on. And I think that ability to recognize that is something that managers and organizations need to really take into account a little bit more,
Mm.
because in capitalist society we just say just make more money, right? But I kind of
Yeah.
like, there's some Japanese ramen shops, right? And they just go around and say
Yeah.
at some point in time, we've run out of soup, so you guys can't have dinner here. Go somewhere else. So
Yeah.
they've kind of maybe got a better idea, right? It's like we just want to make X amount of money, and that's enough for today.
Hmm.
And just come back tomorrow if you wanna, if you wanna have the meal here. And maybe some organizations might need to take that kind of approach. Do you think it's possible?
And that's a harder one on trying to fight capitalism on there. But I think linking to what you're saying, I think that there is a detriment there in not thinking about burnout as part of your kind of business strategy. There's a lot of research that's come out that said that during the last couple of years, what we coined Great Resignation and all of the movement, a lot of that was due to people were burned out within their roles. And while that's bad for the individual, obviously, because they're burned out, and their organizations that they work for, I would say that there's a bigger societal consequence for this, as we're kind of been seeing. A recent study from McKinsey showed that those who have changed jobs in the last year, they're also changing industries, and they're not returning to the workforce at all. So we've heard this from the education, healthcare, retail, hospitality, those type of industries. They're never getting those people back. And that is really problematic. And so if organizations want to understand how to retain their people, not just retain their people, but attract that next generation of the workforce, this really needs to be an imperative for them, because how they're going right now, it is not an attractive place to go to some of these industries. And they're going to have a really big kind of problem moving forward.
And we don't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
have enough people for it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. I think hospitality. I mean, you mentioned hospitality. It's a great example, right? Like, who wants to be a chef these days? You work
Mhm.
all hours, you finish late, and you don't get paid very much. People do it because they love cooking, but that can only last you so long, right? Um, some things that I saw in the study that kind of stuck out to me. I mean, like things like under 44 years old, as an age group, reported themselves as the most burnt out. Those who work from home more than 80% of the time also most burnout. And the really interesting one for me was the difference between carers and non-carers. There wasn't
Mm.
much of a difference in terms of who reported they were burnt out or not. It seemed to be whether you had caring responsibilities or where you didn't, you were kind of equally burnt out, right? And that's kind of interesting. I mean, last week there was an article in The Age, which purely
Mm.
focused on carers and parents who were saying that they were burnt out and couldn't really pay any attention to their children or whoever they had to look after at home. So how do you? I guess what did you kind of learn from those kind of like three key insights? And any reasons? Did any reasons come out from the research?
Let's dig into that first one or the last one first about the carers and non-care conversation. I think that that's a really interesting piece of insight. We found, so this is for the third year in a row now, we found that having caring responsibility. So in the survey, we asked if you have caring responsibility, so taking care of children, elderly parents, or other thing that's outside of your work. Um, do you have those caring responsibility? And we found no difference. No difference between those that have caring responsibilities and not caring responsibilities in terms of the level of burnout. And that's like you mentioned, Z, like that's very counterintuitive to what we might have been reading in the media and also sort of our thinking about that. what we heard when we did a lot of interviews with some of these individuals is actually goes back to the way that we measure burnout. So using the WHO's definition of burnout, there are three dimensions that makes up burnout. So the first one is exhaustion. Second one is that disconnect or cynicism about your job, like kind of hating your job even though you probably used to love it. And the last one is reduced performance. And what we found in this population with caring responsibilities is that they are much more exhausted than the non-caring groups, but they actually created a almost a protective barrier in the other two kind of
Mm.
areas. So, for example, that cynicism, they just don't have that because they actually a lot of them see work as that's a nice sort of separation between my caring responsibilities, the intellectual stimulation you get, the getting to talk to adults kind of thing. They really enjoy that part. So that part really protected them from going into burnout. And also another thing that they said was they actually had to keep themselves relatively positive because they want to be positive to their children or to their to whoever they're caring for. So that almost all kind of have a self-fulfilling prophecy in creating a sort of positive vibe around them. That was quite interesting. And one thing I want to say, so this is the first time, and this is a relatively small population, but one of the organizations that we work with who has a primarily younger workforce, in their population, the population with no caring responsibilities actually had a significantly higher rate of burnout than those with caring responsibilities. So that was it's quite an interesting kind of view into why that is happening.
Right.
Is there a view? I'm part of me is thinking. So I'm 57 years old. So came out of school in 1984. I can't think about how many recessions I've been through. Um, and lost my job more times than I care to think about, and all of those things. Yes, I've never been through something like the pandemic, and that hit me really hard. And I'm a mother as well. Um, so there seems to be almost like a resilience that's built up against some of these knocks, as opposed to perhaps the younger people who have their own challenges but have not built up that resilience yet.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that sort of leads to the, I guess, that first point you was pointing out, where in our study we saw that for the first time, the age group that's experiencing burnout has significantly dropped. So it's for the last couple of years, it's always been that 35 to 44 age group that experienced the highest level of burnout. This year, it's really dropped to under 34, and particularly there was a massive increase in that 18 to 25-year-old age group that is
Mm.
now experiencing the highest level of burnout. And Andre, it's kind of what you mentioned, in our interviews with that, there's a couple of sort of macro factors that's now in effect for this. For the biggest one that they all mentioned, basically the stagnant wages and then the inflation. So they are, they're not able to pay rent and
Yeah,
have
exactly.
and that, even though that's related to a work situation, it is creating such a big level of stress for them. Whereas those in the slightly older age group, generally we have a little bit more buffer, a little bit more savings. Where inflation, it's bad, but it's okay. Like we're still able to kind of handle it.
Yes. Yeah, no, and that's a fair point, and that's why I said, we do know the younger generation have their challenges at the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is something really to keep an eye out for. If we're burning out that earlier age group, we know people who've gone through burnout, there is sort of a long-lasting effect, and it takes quite a long time to kind of recover from that. If we're looking
mm,
into the future on the workforce, this will become problematic for us.
And it's all about pipeline, isn't it? And if
Mm.
you reduce the number of people in that pipeline, then a couple of years time you're going to come into challenges again, which then puts more pressure on the people who are still in that pipeline. It kind of is a bit of a vicious cycle in that sense. What about the work from home? I mean, work from home has always been touted as the great kind of way to rebalance your life. You get more flexibility. How has that? I mean, that 80% working from home or people who work from home 80% of the time were more burnt out than others. That was quite interesting as well. What did you guys see from there?
I think this is probably the most interesting insight that we found this year. Um, with the hybrid work conversation, that's sort of dominating most organizations. How do we do this right? Do we let people choose whatever they want? Do we bring everybody back in? And especially next year, we are definitely going to be hearing this conversation as people are pushing, as organizations pushing their people to come back in the office. And we really want to explore that aspect of that in terms of where people are working and that relationship to burnout. And so, like you mentioned, we found out those working from home over 80% of the time had the highest level of burnout. And 2 to 3 days seems to be the best as it's in terms of burnout because they had the lowest levels. Now, what I would sort of always say is, it's a correlation. It's not a causation. So we don't know if people are burnt out, so they're staying at home, or staying at home does actually create that burnout. What we would say, what we've been, I guess, sort of my hypothesis with that is that there is a lot. Actually, this is another piece of the report, which is we found that organizational support plays a really large role in mitigating burnout. And so, what I mean by organizational support is all those things that makes you feel like you're part of something. You're part of a group. You're part of, and you have a purpose of, you're all working towards something. And also, organizational support means things like engagement, or I think those of us in the field know, it's commonly measured in terms of engagement, psych safety, a sense of belonging, those things like that. We found really strong correlations between, or negative correlations between those and burnout as well. So I think what is happening is those who are at home more of the time, they're not getting some of that benefit of, oh wait, I get to just go to somewhere where I belong there. I'm getting to chat to my colleagues in both formal and informal kind of ways, and there's sort of just these structures that you might find within an office or something like that that shows that, oh, the company cares a bit about me. They're putting, let's say, even things like fresh fruit on. Now, all of those things add up to making people feel like, oh, my company cares about me, and that part of it, I think, yeah, it's a really big mitigator for burnout. Now, that's not to say the
I
people or the organizations. Oh, sorry.
no. Well, no, you go. Finish your thought. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that's not to say, if you just bring people in to sit on Zoom all day or something like that, that actually that's also very problematic. We really need to rethink when we get asked people to come in. What are they gonna do? It should be something different than at home. But it is
And
important to be together.
I think we're going to see the office changing. Someone did a fun post. They hot desk. So when they go in, they hot desk. And he was saying, well, I work from home a couple of days a week, and then I hot desk. I actually want to go in and sit at what is my desk with my colleagues close by. So I think the way we set up offices needs to change. And I know some people go in on days that are supposed to be engagement days. They go in to work with people face to face. And I do worry that that we're giving up a lot for the sake of convenience to not do a commute. And people are saying they're more productive. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when my colleague is not in the office with me, are my worst days. That's 3 days a week. I'm not at all productive. I'm a massive extrovert. I need people around me. And I think this is going to be the hugest things to watch. I think it's still going to change again.
Yeah, I mean, are you more productive because you're working better, or are you more productive because you're working longer hours, right? It's like it's a bit of a unclear definition that people are using about productivity. I don't think they're really churning out more stuff in a shorter period of time. Their hours of work are just being stretched, across a greater part of the day, which then contributes to the three factors, right? So exhaustion, cynicism, and then the lack of or the decline in performance.
Hmm.
So Andrew, you had some questions, I think,
Yeah. So
about keeping
I
people in the organization, is it?
yeah. Thanks, E. So I guess one of the biggest things that we're talking about in HR and TA at the moment is retention, but also the attracting people as well. So what do the results tell us around what we can do to keep people to stay? And what we can do around attracting them. And the biggest topic of conversation for us is always, the employee value proposition. And, should we be putting those sorts of things on our careers website, and sort of using them as an attraction strategy?
Yeah, that is a great question. And one of the things that we want to do when this in this study and these reports is to provide organizations with actions that they can take. It's not just a report saying, "Oh, they're kind of bad. Okay, let's move on," but also have solutions to do that. And so this year, uh, we asked the participants why they're staying and why they would be attracted to join another organization. And what we found in terms of why people are staying, the top 5 reasons are having flexible work arrangements, fair and equitable pay, supportive colleagues, alignment with my personal values, and fulfilling work. So all of those things, I think those are probably pretty we probably heard all of those things before in terms of why people are staying. Now, the attraction thing, I think that's where we saw a little bit of difference on what would make somebody leave the organization. The number one thing that came out was the increased compensation. Well, you guys are specialized in TA, so you know this. Generally, that is not the number one reason for people leaving an organization. Even doing research on engagement and things like that, like compensation, it might pop up every now and then, but it's not a top 5 kind of reason for that. But right now, kind of going back to those macroeconomic things, this is the reason. And we saw this across the board. Doesn't matter what gender you identify with, what your age group is, if you're burnt out or not. This is the number one reason people are looking for. So I think for the TA population, that's something interesting to kind of have a look at. And then the other ones are flexible work arrangements. So people are looking for flexibility, better work-life balance, healthier work culture. And this one was a little bit surprising. It popped up, although there's a lot of conversations here, which is the 4-day work week. That's a conversation I think is starting to bubble quite a bit.
Yes.
Although personally, I think more needs to be, I think we need to talk about it a little bit more about the fence on that. I have a big fear that organizations are going to do that poorly and basically squeeze in 4 days or 5 days of work into 4 weeks, which will create more stress for people. Now, I've definitely heard some organizations doing that really well, but I think that
We
is
at something that I went to earlier this year, Indebted, definitely looked like they were doing it very well, and it was there was some real structure and policies around. On Friday, you do not work, and there's no meetings or anything. The only time it went wrong, I think, was the Australians sometimes had to do a little bit of work because someone was behind, America or Europe or whatever. So because of international time differences. But yeah, I think it's going to be something we'll be doing in the future. It's just how we get it right.
Yeah, there are many things on that 4-day work week which are actually quite hard to figure out. I mean, the first one is the people who already work part-time. What happens to them if you're working 4 days a week? Common complaint from many working moms is I'm working 4 days but doing 5 days work but getting paid for 4 days, right? So, what happens now? Do I suddenly get a 20% increase in my pay because everyone else basically is getting the same pay and has to work 1 day less? You've got a whole bunch of rostering situations that you got to kind of think of if you're in service industries. I mean, customer facing roles can't all work 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Themselves, right? And then you've got the inflation, question. If everyone's getting 20% more pay for, or 20% less work but the same pay, that's 20% pay rise effectively.
Mhm.
How does that kind of play through in a high inflation environment that we've got already? Interest rates going to go up even further, or what's the situation there? So definitely, it sounds great, and some companies are, some very large companies are doing it. I mean, Kellogg's has done it in summer for years.
Mm.
They always
Yeah.
have, they've had summertime, right? So they've had 4.5 days during the summer months, or like for 20 years or something like that. So it has been done for a long time, but I think at the scale at which we're trying to do this at the moment, I agree. There are many things that many smarter people have to
Mm.
kind of work out there, especially that that part time, the people who are already flexible, like what that one is, I think, the one that
Yeah.
needs the most thought.
That's a great point about flexibility. Like, if the purpose of 4-day work week is to increase flexibility, I heard somebody mention this. The 4-day work week sounds like a solution that's been made up by um, males who doesn't actually have caring responsibilities. As we all know, like if you need to pick up kids and things like that's an everyday kind of thing. It is, you don't just pick up kids on Friday or 1 day a week. The flexibility that people are looking for is it's an everyday, being able to kind of move the schedule around, and if you need to pick up kids or drop off something, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And to just
Mm,
say on a particular day when everybody works, it seems like a very I don't know. I think more conversation. I'm not against
yeah.
that. In principle, it's good, but there's a lot of details.
Yeah, definitely. It's always the detail, right? Devil's in the detail. That's what kills us all.
Yeah.
Um, so John, I think, in terms of closing ideas or comments, what would you say that companies should do in terms of addressing the burnout challenge that we have? I mean, there's
Yeah.
heaps of memes coming around. You guys all say you're burnt out, but here's some free pizza, for example. That's not going to cut it, but what should organizations be doing to address the challenge?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I saw one yesterday with somebody on fire and somebody else saying, "Have you considered doing more yoga?" And so, no, those are definitely not the solutions there. I would just say for people to realize that there's no quick fixes or silver bullets that's going to solve this problem, right? There's no mandates that the leaders of the organization can say or do to just solve burnout. What they need is to really to have that conversation about the way that they work and how they want to treat their people. So it starts. So first, kind of with my organizational psych hat, I would definitely say that leaders play a really large role in this. Everything from talking about the problem that burnout is a thing. I've experienced burnout. This is how I dealt with it. Being open and having that conversation so that it's more okay for people to talk about it, and give others more openings to, hey, let's try different things and let's see if this works or not. That whole experimentation kind of thing. I think that's really important for organizations. But on the other side too, for as individuals and within our team, we have the power to make these little changes. We don't need to wait until the CEO or the chief people officer comes down with some magical strategy for everybody. Within our team, if the three of us were on a team, we can say, hey, we are not going. Let's just agree to not email each other after 6 p.m. and on weekends. We just don't do that. Or if you're going to go on holiday, I will take over all the responsibilities for any emails, anything that comes in. So when you're relaxing, you're off. You're off. You're completely switched off. You don't need to be checking emails all the time. That either Andrea and I will take that over. So there's all these little things too that can be done at that micro level. There's other things actually in the report. We do talk about a few more of these ideas that smaller teams can try. So if you have a look there, just have a look there for some of the items.
And we will include the link in the in when we release it so that everyone can take a look. Highly recommend it, folks. It's actually, to a certain extent, not rocket science. It's common sense. And there's something also about feeling like people need the permission to do some of it. People are fairly compliant at work. I've been working long enough to just, when I did have my baby and I said, look, sorry, got to pick him up from care by 6 o'clock. I'm on the London tubes and, I've got to be gone by 4:45. I'm leaving every day at 4:45. Too bad, everyone. And, but what, I came in at 7:30 to mitigate that. And I just told them what I was doing, but not everyone feels like they can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that leadership role modeling really works. If your leader does that and talks about that just gives a lot more permission for both the people under them to be able to do that or allow their people do those kind of things. So that communication is quite important.
To do that, I think. We need men to be role modeling all of this behavior. And I think that's the nicest thing I've seen come out of COVID has been men stepping up and actually taking on the caring responsibilities they're supposed to have. Sorry, that's my little feminist streak coming out there, boys.
It's all right. Well, it's well deserved, so it's fine.
All right. So I think we need to finish off here just in the interests of time. Was there any final things we wanted to talk about or share?
I think from my point of view, that firstly, starting with that three-pronged definition of burnout, exhaustion, cynicism, and decline in performance, I think that's really something important to keep in mind because, yes, as John mentioned, all the parents feel exhausted, definitely, but whether you have the other two elements in there is something to watch out for, and be conscious of in case you're heading towards that kind of more critical burnout stage. And everything else we've discussed today has been great. So I'm just going to put myself on mute because it's getting a bit too noisy where I am.
And where possible, work and do a vodcast from a cafe is always highly recommended. May I also suggest get a puppy? John, thank you so much for your time. I'm connecting with you on LinkedIn. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. And absolutely love that this is getting so much attention because I think that we need it. And I'm very, very happy that we get to have a chat with you as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's amazing work. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me and giving me a little bit of time to kind of talk about some of this stuff, which I'm quite passionate about.
Yep, and I kind of wished I'd sort of changed into my purple glasses to talk to you as well. All right, see, thanks. It was good to see you again, mate. Enjoy the coffee.
Thank you. I'm not even in the cafe. That's the worst part. I'm outside the cafe, but it's just echoing everywhere. But anyway. All right, we'll speak to you later.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.